Hello and welcome back. I am Dr. Ananya Barua, teaching philosophy in the Department of Philosophy, Hindu College. So we had been discussing about the philosophy of mind and the related theories connected with it. We have just about mentioned the physicalist theories or the materialist accounts of mental states. To begin with, we have had mentioned about the identity theory and functionalism as the two main theories that we will be discussing in our lecture series today. Continuing from our previous lecture, we begin with J.J.C. Smart's identity theory. What is this identity theory? Identity theory, as we have mentioned, is one of the materialistic accounts of mind. Identity theory, as the very name suggests, is a comprehensive philosophical examination of the nature of sensations and their connection to brain activity, which was published from the 1959 paper Sensations and Brain Processes by J.J.G. Smart. I will now be reviewing the key ideas and points raised in this very historical article, Sensations and Brain Processes by J.J.G.C. Smart. The notion that Smart disproves the idea that some experiences such as pain or after images are essentially non-physical and so not susceptible to physical processes. He disproves of dualism, which makes a distinction between the brain's physical and mental functions. He argues that experiences can be fully explained by physical processes that take place in the brain, which is consistent with a materialist view of reality. Smart agrees with the materialistic viewpoint because it is consistent with Occam's razor. Occam's razor can popularly be called as the methodology used by J.J.G. Smart, which states that the explanation that necessitates the fewest assumptions is typically the superior explanation. In simple words, Occam's razor basically means come directly to the point. Phenomena, including human conduct and awareness, can be explained in terms of physical processes. He believes it makes more sense to explain sentiments as brain functions than as anything more complex. Another term which is recurring in J.J.C. Smart's paper, Sensations and Brain Processes, is something which is called as the nomological dangler. Besides the Occam's razor, we see nomological dangler take a significant place. What is this nomological dangler? Nomological danglers or mental phenomena that in the event of dualism cannot be explained by physical principles are an idea that Smart introduces in his introduction. Dualism is less credible in light of materialism, which maintains that everything, including consciousness, is subject to physical rules and that unique principles are needed to explain how the mind and body interact. The main contention of Smart is that brain activities and feelings are the same even whether the language used to describe them varies. For example, when one says, observe an electric discharge, and someone other says, I see lightning, for instance, refer to the same physical event, but they are not the same. In a similar way, pain can be thought of as a brain function even though experience itself is depicted differently. And this precisely is the identity theory where mental states is taken as identical to brain processes. The paper Sensations and Brain Processes addresses a number of objections to the idea that emotions are mental processes. The first objection: Since people may talk about their experiences without knowing anything about the brain, it is inferred that feelings are not brain activities. In response to this, Smart says, the fact that someone does not understand the brain does not prove that sensations are not brain processes. Just as someone can see lightning without understanding it that it is an electrical discharge. Objection 2. It is conceivable that future research will contradict our current understanding of brain functions. Response: this shows that our understanding of feelings may evolve in a similar manner to how our knowledge of lightning has, without implying that feelings are not mental activities. Objection 3. It is argued that because of the properties of sensations, such as color or pain, brain activities and sensations are not the same. The response: sensations can be viewed as separate brain processes, much as the morning star and evening star are the same celestial object, which is Venus, although being perceived in different situations. Smart emphasizes that when he says that a sensation is a brain activity, he means exactly what he means when he says that 7 is identical to the least prime number bigger than 5. These, but does not prove that the objects of reference in both brain processes language and sensory language are the same in the physical world. Smart thus concludes that materialism, which interprets sensations as brain processes, is preferable to dualism. This result is both easier and more tenable from a scientific standpoint. An intricate set of laws would be required to explain the relationship between the mind and body, which is less desirable from a philosophical standpoint. The identity theory put out by Smart claims that mental experiences, including sensations, are the same as brain activities. Nevertheless, he recognizes and discusses a number of challenges to this view. Those looking for an alternative theory to Smart's identity theory usually investigate eliminative materialism, functionalism, or dualism. Now, there have been several possible way outs of Smart's identity theory, which are the following. Dualism. The dualistic theory, which holds that mental, such as perceptions and consciousness, and physical, such as brain processes, events, are separate and irreducible from one another, is a conventional counter-argument to the identity theory. Dualists contend that because mental experiences like feeling pain or the color red have distinct characteristics that do not seem to be reducible to physical terms, such as qualia, it is impossible to adequately describe mental states in terms of physical brain processes. Dualism could manifest as substance dualism. René Descartes postulated that the body and the mind are two distinct substances. Property dualism, despite sharing a common substrate, the brain, for example, mental and physical qualities are two different types of attributes. Smart is against dualism, especially because it creates nomological danglers, which are unexplainable exceptions to the principles of physics, and adds needless complexity, citing Occam's razor. Functionalism. Functionalism, which contends that mental states are more closely related to the functional roles or purposes of the brain than to any particular physical processes therein, is yet another method to break free from Smart's identity theory. Put differently, a mental state is determined by its actions rather than its composition. For instance, rather than referring to a particular mental state, the experience of pain is connected with the functional role of pain, such as inducing avoidance behavior or warning the organism of risk. Functionalism holds that a machine or alien with a different physical makeup can nonetheless experience mental states as long as its functional responsibilities are performed. SMART insists on a tight connection of brain functions with sensations, which functionalism avoids. SMART's thesis is further called into question by the issue of qualia or subjective experience. Qualia proponents contend that subjective experiences cannot be reduced to brain processes because they are inherently separate from them. Philosophers such as Thomas Nagel contend that physical explanations are unable to adequately convey the essential substance nature of conscious experiences as demonstrated in his well-known work What It Is Like to Be a Bat. The qualia theory of phenomenalism. For instance, the subjective experience of seeing red cannot be well captured by our current understanding of the brain mechanisms behind color perception. Because identity theory fails to take these fundamental subjective features into account, some philosophers claim that it is insufficient. Destroying materialism. Eliminative materialism, a more extreme alternative to SMART's identity theory, maintains that as neuroscience develops, our common sense understanding of mental states such as beliefs, desires, and sensations will eventually be rendered obsolete. Eliminative materialism holds that brain activities are the only things that qualify as sensations in the sense that we now understand them. We shall only need to explain brain states if we have to completely develop neuroscience and no longer need to discuss about mental states at all. Eliminative materialists would contend that even in this distinction is needless, despite the fact that SMART's identity theory maintains a place for mental states despite the fact that they are brain activities. The fifth kind of physicalism is the non-reductive physicalism, which is an alternative perspective within the physicalist paradigm that maintains that while mental states are real and dependent on brain conditions, they cannot be reduced to them. According to this theory, mental states have unique characteristics that come from intricate brain processes. This method, which does not adhere to rigorous identity theory of dualism, aims to respect the subjective experience of mental states. The SMART method of handling disputes. In response to criticisms of his identity theory, SMART claims that he makes a distinction between describing a sensation and comprehending the underlying brain processes, contending that although sensations are brain processes, language used to describe them need not necessarily strictly follow neurophysiological definitions. But philosophers who want to go beyond SMART's identity theory frequently search for more complex accounts of the mind-brain interaction, as those offered by functionalism, qualia theory, or non-reductive physicalism. In brief, the following could be the way out of SMART's identity theory. 1. Dualism, which holds a rigid division between the mental and the physical. 2. Functionalism, that characterizes mental states not in terms of physical processes but in terms of their roles. 3. Qualia theory or phenomenalism, that emphasizes how subjective experiences are indescribable. 4. Eliminative materialism, the theory that proposes a complete abandonment of mental states as we know them. 5th, non-reductive physicalism, that acknowledges that although mental states can be reduced to brain states, they are not reducible to them. The worries that SMART's identity theory would not adequately explain the nature of mental states or consciousness are addressed by these alternatives, which offer alternate approaches. Now is the time for us to precisely delve in greater details the article about sensations and brain processes and pick up the key insights. The article offers a comprehensive examination of Smart's philosophical work, Sensations and Brain Processes, which bolsters the Australian materialism or mind-brain identity theory. This theory holds that mental things such as consciousness and sensations are nothing more than brain activity. Here is a thorough examination of the main points of the article. Mind-brain identity theory. This idea holds that mental processes such as sensations are nothing more than brain functions. For example, experiencing pain or seeing a yellow afterimage after being in direct sunlight are physiological events that arise from specific brain activity rather than being mysterious or non-physical. In accordance with this perspective, Smart firmly subscribes to materialism rather than dualism, which maintains that the body and mind are two separate entities. Smart provides an example of an afterimage, which is a yellowish-orange visual impression that happens when one looks at a bright light and then averts their attention. He uses this to stress that this experience is subjective and particular to each person rather than that there is an independent, non-physical reality. Watching a chair, for example, is an external experience, but an afterimage is a brain activity that exists only in our awareness. According to Smart, just because physical science finds it difficult to explain this subjective experience does not imply that senses are non-physical. My intention is to show that all experiences, even the closest ones, have their roots in the bodily process of the brain, and that is the intention of J.J.C. Smart. Smart disagrees with dualism, which maintains that mental processes are a component of other non-physical reality. Using the maxim that the simplest explanation is always the best, Occam's razor, he argues that research is progressively showing that all activity in living things, including mental functions, are physical. Therefore, he finds it incomprehensible that consciousness states should be immune to physical explanation. According to him, nomological danglers are phenomena that contradict recognized scientific beliefs, for it is a less convincing explanation since it requires strange and complex laws to explain the interaction between the mental and physical. So, Smart was very clear that one cannot really be dangling in the zone of a nomological dangler, for one has to be clear whether the mental states belong to the physical states or physical laws or the psychological laws, and not be a pendulum oscillating between the two. Further, if we talk about the principal theory, we would see there is a key concept about perceptions as brain functions. The fundamental idea of Smart's thesis is that sensations are essentially the result of brain activity. However, he acknowledges that sensation statements cannot sum up claims about the functioning of the brain. The logic of sensation statements differ from that of brain processes assertions. When someone says, "I have an afterimage," for example, they are not exactly characterizing their brain activity. Rather, they are reporting it. It is similar to the notion that the nation consists solely of its citizens, yet talking about a nation makes sense in a different way than talking about specific citizens. The article presents Smart's rebuttals to several criticisms to his materialistic perspective. Some of such criticisms we had already seen in the introduction of our lecture. Now we will be analyzing them in details. The first criticism is about lack of knowledge about neurobiology. People are able to explain their experiences without having any knowledge of how the brain acts, which is a proof that sensations are different from brain processes. The answer to this rebuttal that SMART gives is, SMART compares this to the fact that discussions about lightning can occur amongst people who are unaware that it is an electrical discharge. That being said, feelings are still a component of the brain, even if it does not fully comprehend how it functions. Objection 2. There could be errors in neuroscience. The relationship between experience and brain processes may vary because neuroscience is an ever-evolving field. SMART responds by saying that this does not disprove the idea that emotions are byproducts of mental activity. It only serves to highlight the potential that, like the early errors about lightning, our understanding of science is still incomplete. The third objection, qualia and subjective experience. The physiological processes of the brain seen to be distinct from the characteristics of the senses, such as color perception. The responses, SMART points out that the qualia, the subjective perception of color, are a part of the physical universe, even though they may seem to be separate from brain operations. For example, the perception of yellow is entirely dependent on the brain's capacity to distinguish between objects. The fourth rebuttal is to the idea that sensations occur in physical space. An after image is not located in physical space, brain processes are. SMART counters that he is talking about the after image experience as a brain activity rather than the after image as a separate brain activity. He is obviously referring to the after image, a subjective experience that is correlated with brain activity, as is evidenced by the distinction. Question 5 or objection 5, that describe the sensations and functions of the brain. We use different language to describe the brain activity like neurons firing than to describe sensations like pain, and thus sensations and brain processes are distinct and not identical. To this, SMART responds by pointing out that while if language is distinct, this does not mean that mental functions and physical processes experiences are separate. Similar to how the terms someone and doctor, albeit using different nomenclature, refer to the same person. The sixth objection about sensations and brain processes not being identical is the privacy of sentiment. Thoughts are shared with others, but feelings are private. As such, they must be unique. In response to this, SMART views that the difference in terminology does not make experiences and brain functions unique. At that point, we could even be able to see how someone's brain works and identify the precise sensation they are experiencing, imagining without relying on brain mechanisms. We will, in our next segment, see the further criticisms and how SMART responds. Thank you so much.